This morning, federal agents executed coordinated raids across multiple states, arresting a sitting federal judge and dismantling a criminal network.
4:52 a.m., Minneapolis, Minnesota. Federal agents moved through darkness. No sirens, no warning, no escape. Frost covered the windshields of unmarked vehicles lining Hennepin Avenue. Inside those cars sat FBI counterterrorism units, DEA special agents, and ICE enforcement teams. They had been planning this moment for 11 months. What they were about to uncover would expose a network connecting a federal judge, Somali criminal syndicates, and a Venezuelan intelligence operation run from inside American borders. This wasn't immigration fraud. This was treason wearing a black robe. Let me show you how it happened. The target was Judge Layla Mahad, appointed to the Minneapolis Immigration Court in 2019, a rising star in progressive legal circle, praised for her humanitarian work, celebrated for her advocacy. But behind closed doors, she was operating the largest asylum fraud network in American history. The scheme was elegant, brutal, and completely invisible. Young Somali men arrived in Minneapolis by the hundred. No families, no women, no children, just military-aged males with identical stories of persecution. Stories crafted in Mogadishu, memorized on flights to Dulles, delivered word for word in Minneapolis courtroom. Judge Mahad approved all. Between 2020 and 2024, she granted asylum to 1,847 applicants. Her approval rate was 96.3%. The national average was 31%. Nobody noticed, or maybe nobody wanted to. If you want the full truth about what happened next, hit like so this story reaches more people who need to see this. The investigation began not in Minneapolis, but in Mogadishu, Somalia. CIA field operatives tracking al-Shabaab financing noticed something unusual. Money flowing into known terrorist cells wasn't coming from the Middle East. It was coming from the American Midwest. Wire transfers, Hawala networks, cryptocurrency wallets, all originating from a 3-block radius in Minneapolis. The amounts were staggering. Between January 2022 and October 2024, over $47.8 million moved from Minnesota to Somalia. The transactions were small enough to avoid automatic federal reporting, but together, they painted a picture. Someone in America was funding something dangerous. CIA shared the intelligence with FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. Special Agent Marcus Holloway caught the case, a 22-year veteran with expertise in transnational crime. He started pulling threads. The first thread was a name, Hassan Osman Yusuf. Yusuf arrived in Minneapolis in March 2021. His asylum application claimed he fled al-Shabaab persecution after refusing to join their ranks. His interview was compelling. His documents appeared authentic. Judge Mahad approved his case in 14 minutes. 3 months later, Yusuf purchased a commercial property in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood for $890,000 cash. A refugee with no job history bought nearly $1 million in real estate. Holloway dug deeper. Bank records showed Yusuf wasn't alone. 17 other asylum recipients approved by Judge Mahad had made similar purchases. Property, businesses, luxury vehicles, combined assets exceeded $23 million. None of them had reported income. The pattern was unmistakable. These weren't refugees, they were operatives. Comment exposed below if you're ready to see how deep this corruption goes. By August 2024, the FBI had identified 73 individuals connected to the network. All had received asylum through Judge Mahad's court. All had suspiciously large assets, and all were tied to the same locations. 3 buildings in Cedar Riverside, a logistics company near the airport, a halal grocery chain with 14 locations. Surveillance teams watched for weeks. What they saw confirmed their worst fears. Young men entered the buildings at odd hours, late night, early morning. They carried duffel bags. They stayed for hours. They left with nothing visible. Thermal imaging detected unusual heat signatures in basement area. Electrical consumption spiked beyond residential norms. Cell tower data showed encrypted communications using protocols linked to foreign intelligence services. The buildings weren't homes, they were operational bases. Agent Holloway requested Title III wiretaps. A federal judge approved them within 48 hours. The recordings were damning. Conversations in Somali and Spanish, references to shipments and schedules, mentions of Caracas and Mogadishu in the same breath, and repeated references to the judge and our protection. One intercept from September 12, 2024 was particularly chilling. The judge handles the papers. We handle the rest. As long as she keeps signing, we keep moving. The speaker was Hassan Yusuf. The recipient was a voice analysts later identified as belonging to Venezuelan intelligence operative Carlos Mendoza, a known associate of Diosdado Cabello, Venezuela's vice president and head of the Cartel de los Soles. This wasn't just asylum fraud. It was a joint criminal venture between Somali networks and Venezuelan state actors, operating freely inside America. The breakthrough came in October. ICE detained a Somali national attempting to board a flight to Mogadishu. His luggage contained $340,000 in vacuum-sealed cash bundles. Under questioning, he broke. His name was Abdi Rahman. He had entered the U.S. through Judge Mahad's court in 2022. He described the operation in detail. The network recruited young men in Somalia, men with no criminal record, no terrorism link, clean backgrounds. Venezuelan operatives in Mogadishu provided them with false persecution narratives and coached them on asylum procedures. Once in the United States, they received new instructions. They were housed in network property, given employment at network businesses, and tasked with moving money and materials for what Rahman described as special operations. He didn't know specifics. He didn't ask questions. He did what he was told. And Judge Mahad made it all possible. Every asylum approval was a recruitment. Every case she signed was a door open. If this shocks you, hit like now before I show you what happened during the raid. The order came at 4:12 a.m. on November 3rd of 2024. Simultaneous raids across 17 locations. Over 400 federal agents mobilized. FBI hostage rescue team, DEA tactical units, ICE enforcement teams, Minneapolis police SWAT providing perimeter security. The targets included Judge Mahad's courthouse office, her residence in Adena, and all 15 properties linked to the network. 0 hour was 4:52 a.m. At Judge Mahad's office, the entry was surgical. A battering ram struck the reinforced door once. The lock shattered. Agents poured through with rifles raised and flashlights cutting through darkness. The office looked normal at first. Mahogany desk, law books, framed degrees from Georgetown, a portrait of her family beside an American flag. But in the back conference room, agents found something else. A safe hidden behind a false electrical panel. Inside were ledgers, USB drives, burner phones, and $127,000 in cash bundled with rubber bands. The ledgers detailed payments, dates, amounts, names. Case 4472, H. Yusuf, 15K received. Case 4891, A. Hassan, 12K received. Case 51003, M. Abdi, 18K received. She had been selling asylum approvals, $15,000 per case, sometimes more for expedited processing. Over 4 years, Judge Layla Mahad had earned an estimated $4.2 million in bribes. At her Adena residence, agents found more. Offshore account statements from banks in Dubai and Panama, property deeds for vacation homes in Turkey and Kenya, encrypted communications with Venezuelan contacts. One email stood out. The arrangement continues to benefit all parties. Your discretion ensures our success. The next group arrives January 2025. Sender, Carlos Mendoza. Date, October 2024. She wasn't just complicit, she was coordinating. The raids on network properties were more dramatic. At the Cedar Riverside building on 15th Avenue, agents encountered resistance. As the entry team approached, men inside locked steel interior doors. Agents deployed breaching charges. The explosion echoed through the neighborhood. Smoke filled the hallways. Inside, they found a fortress, reinforced walls, security cameras covering every angle, and a basement converted into a storage facility. Stacked floor to ceiling were duffel bags. Agents opened them one by one. Cash, hundreds of thousands in mixed denominations. Weapons, Glock 19s with filed serial numbers, AR-15 rifle, ammunition crates, documents, passports from 6 countries, asylum applications with identical handwriting, flight manifests, and narcotics, 43 kilograms of fentanyl, street value approximately $9.7 million. This wasn't a refugee support network. It was a criminal enterprise with military-grade infrastructure. Type yes if you're ready to see what they found in the underground bunker. The most shocking discovery came at the logistics company near Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. The business, called North Star Freight Solutions, appeared legitimate. It had federal contracts. It employed 37 people. It operated daily shipments across the Midwest. But beneath the warehouse floor was something nobody expected, an underground bunker, accessible only through a hydraulic lift disguised as an electrical junction box. When agents descended, they found a fully operational command center, computers running encrypted communication software, satellite phones connected to foreign networks, maps of American cities marked with color-coded pins: Minneapolis, Columbus, Portland, Seattle, San Diego. Each pin represented a location. Each location represented a cell. The network wasn't just in Minneapolis. It had metastasized across America. On the servers, forensic teams recovered files detailing the operation's scope. Over 1,200 individuals had been placed through Judge Mahad's court, and similar operations in 3 other cities. Each recruit was assigned tasks: money movement, material transport, surveillance. The Venezuelan connection became clearer. Diosdado Cabello's Cartel de los Soles had partnered with Somali networks to establish logistics infrastructure inside the United States. Venezuela provided strategic direction and financial resources. Somalia provided manpower and operational cover. The goal was simple: move drugs, move money, move influence, and nobody would suspect refugees. The fentanyl seized that morning represented just one shipment. Intelligence suggested 14 others had already been distributed across the country in the prior 6 months. Total estimated volume: 600 kilograms. Potential fatalities: 300,000 Americans. This wasn't immigration fraud. This was chemical warfare by proxy. Share this so more people understand what's really happening in our immigration system. As dawn broke over Minneapolis, the scope of the operation became clear. FBI arrested 287 individuals across 17 locations. ICE detained another 143 for immigration violations. U.S. Marshals took Judge Layla Mahad into federal custody at 6:47 a.m. She was still in her nightgown. The perp walk was brief. Cameras caught her face. No tears, no emotion, just cold silence. She knew she was finished. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing $4.2 million in bribe payments deposited into shell accounts controlled by Mahad and her brother, a Minneapolis attorney who had helped structure the scheme. Over 2,000 recorded phone calls between Mahad and network operatives discussing case approval, payment schedules, and operational security. Testimony from 17 cooperating witnesses, including Abdi Rahman, who detailed how the network functioned and Mahad's central role. Physical evidence tying her to Venezuelan intelligence, including travel records showing 6 trips to Caracas between 2020 and 2024, all on private flights paid for by shell companies. Federal prosecutors called it one of the most significant national security cases in a decade. By 9 a.m., the story had broken nationally. News helicopters circled the Cedar Riverside neighborhood. Reporters lined the sidewalks outside Mahad's courthouse. Protesters gathered with signs. Some demanded justice. Others claimed the raids were racially motivated. The Somali community was fractured. Many were shocked. They had trusted Judge Mahad. She was one of them, a symbol of success, a voice for the voiceless. But others had suspected something. Whispers about young men arriving with money. Rumors about businesses that didn't quite make sense. Questions nobody wanted to ask out loud. Now, the truth was undeniable. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey addressed the media at noon. His statement was carefully worded. Today's operation reflects the complexity of the threats we face. We are grateful for the work of federal law enforcement. We are heartbroken by the betrayal of public trust, and we are committed to ensuring this never happens again. But trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild easily. Comment your reaction below if this story shocks you. The federal investigation continued for months after the raids. Forensic accountants traced the money. Over $47.8 million had moved through the network. Much of it was never recovered, laundered through international channels, buried in assets abroad. The DEA tracked the fentanyl. 6 additional shipments were intercepted based on intelligence from seized devices. Combined, the operation prevented an estimated 800 kilograms of fentanyl from reaching American streets. That amount could have killed 1 million people. The FBI dismantled cells in 4 other cities: Columbus, Ohio; Portland, Maine; Seattle, Washington; San Diego, California. Each operated similarly. Different judges, different network, same model. Judge Mahad wasn't alone. She was part of something bigger. Federal prosecutors charged her with 37 counts. Conspiracy to commit immigration fraud, bribery, money laundering, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, material support to foreign criminal organizations. She faced life in prison. Her attorney argued she had been coerced, threatened, manipulated by criminal elements beyond her control. Nobody believed it. The evidence showed a willing participant, someone who had calculated the risks and chosen profit over duty, someone who had worn the robe while auctioning justice to the highest bidder. Her trial was set for June 2025. Hassan Osman Yusuf and 17 other network leaders were charged with federal racketeering, drug trafficking, and conspiracy. Venezuelan operative Carlos Mendoza remained at large, protected by the Maduro regime. The U.S. Treasury sanctioned 12 Venezuelan officials connected to the operation. The State Department issued arrest warrants that would likely never be executed because Venezuela doesn't extradite its own. The Somali government cooperated, providing intelligence on recruitment operations in Mogadishu. 5 facilitators were arrested, but the pipeline had been active for years. Hundreds had already passed through. How many were still here? How many were still operational? Nobody knew for certain. Hit subscribe so you don't miss updates on this case as it develops. The fallout extended beyond criminal charges. The Executive Office for Immigration Review launched an internal review of all immigration judges. Approval rates were audited. Case files were re-examined. 3 additional judges were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Congress held hearings. Senators demanded answers. How would this happen? How had a federal judge operated a criminal network for 4 years without detection? The answers were uncomfortable. Judicial independence meant limited oversight. Asylum cases moved quickly with minimal review. And political pressure to process cases rapidly had created an environment where fraud could flourish. Nobody wanted to be accused of targeting immigrant communities. So, red flags were ignored, patterns were dismissed, and warnings were buried until people died. The fentanyl distributed through the network killed at least 87 Americans in confirmed cases. The actual number was likely higher. Overdoses often don't trace back to specific supply chains. Those 87 had names, family, futures. Emily Sanderson, 23, nursing student in Columbus, overdosed on pills she thought were Percocet. They were pure fentanyl. Marcus Tate, 31, construction worker in Portland, tried heroin laced with fentanyl, died in his apartment, found 3 days later. Jessica Lynn, 19, college freshman in Seattle, took what friends said was Molly at a party. It was fentanyl. She was dead before the ambulance arrived. These weren't statistics. They were human beings destroyed by a system that prioritized speed over safety, compassion over accountability, and symbolism over substance. Judge Mahad's courtroom had become a gateway for poison, and she had signed every approval with a smile. If you believe justice matters, comment "justice" below. The deeper investigation revealed the Venezuelan angle was even more sinister than initially understood. Diosdado Cabello's Cartel de los Soles had been experimenting with new trafficking routes for years. Traditional pathways through Mexico were contested. Cartels fought for control. American enforcement had intensified. So Venezuela innovated. Why fight at the border when you can fly people through legitimate channels? Asylum applicants don't face the same scrutiny as smuggled migrants. They arrive legally. They enter the system, and once inside, they disappear into communities where oversight is minimal. The Somali network provided the perfect cover. Somali refugees have legitimate reasons to seek asylum: war, terrorism, persecution. Their claims are credible. Vetting is complex, and denying them feels politically dangerous. Venezuela exploited that dynamic. They recruited clean operatives, coached them on asylum narratives, provided them with forged documents and backstories, then placed them with judges like Mahad who had been compromised. It was asymmetric warfare, and it was working. The operation had moved an estimated $127 million in drug proceeds over 4 years. It had distributed at least 800 kilograms of fentanyl, and it had established infrastructure that could be reactivated at any time. Because the network wasn't destroyed, it was disrupted. Cutting off one head doesn't kill the hydra, it just forces it to grow another. Federal investigators knew more cells existed, more judges might be compromised, more operatives were likely embedded in communities across America, but finding them required resources, time, and political will. All 3 were in short supply. The case also exposed uncomfortable questions about immigration policy itself. How do you balance humanitarian obligations with national security? How do you protect genuine refugees while preventing exploitation? How do you enforce laws without demonizing vulnerable communities? There are no easy answers, but ignoring the problem isn't an option. Because criminals don't care about good intentions. They care about opportunities. And America's immigration system had given them plenty. Share this video before it gets buried by algorithms. By February 2025, the criminal cases were moving toward trial. Judge Mahad remained in federal custody. Bail was denied. Prosecutors argued she was a flight risk with international connections and access to hidden assets. Her legal team filed motion after motion. Suppression of evidence, dismissal of charges, change of venue, all were denied. The evidence was too strong, the crimes too clear, the betrayal too profound. Hassan Yusuf and 12 co-defendants accepted plea deals. They cooperated with investigators, providing details about recruitment, logistics, and financial operations. Their testimony would ensure Mahad spent the rest of her life in prison. The Somali community in Minneapolis remained divided. Some viewed the prosecutions as justice, a necessary reckoning with criminality that had hidden behind identity and victimhood. Others saw it as persecution, a government crackdown on immigrant communities using isolated incidents to justify broader discrimination. The truth, as always, was more complicated. Most Somali refugees in America are law-abiding. They work, they raise families, they contribute. They fled unimaginable violence, and rebuilt their lives with courage. But within that community, criminals operated. They exploited cultural bond. They used shared language and religion as cover. They weaponized victimhood to silence questions, and people like Judge Mahad enabled them. Not because she believed in their cause, but because she profited from their crimes. That's the difference between justice and revenge. Justice targets criminals. Revenge targets communities. The FBI operation in Minneapolis was justice, but the damage lingered. Trust between immigrant communities and law enforcement weakened. Asylum applicants faced longer waits and harsher scrutiny, and genuine refugees suffered because criminals had poisoned the system. That's the cost of corruption. It spreads like poison through institutions. It turns compassion into suspicion, and it makes everyone a little less safe. The fight against networks like this isn't about immigration. It's about accountability. Nobody gets a pass because of their background. Nobody gets immunity because of their identity. And nobody gets to hide behind victimhood while victimizing others. The law applies to everyone, or it applies to no one. Comment below if you agree that justice must be blind. The broader implications of the Minneapolis operation extend far beyond one city. Federal agencies now estimate that similar networks may operate in at least 12 other metropolitan areas. Different ethnic communities, different trafficking organizations, but the same blueprint. Compromise a judge, flood the system, establish infrastructure, exploit freedom. It's elegant because it's simple. And it works because America's institutions assume faith. Judges are trusted, asylum seekers are given the benefit of the doubt, communities resist scrutiny, criminals understand that, and they exploit it ruthlessly. The solution isn't closing borders, it's accountability. Judges must face oversight, asylum claims must be verified, and communities must be willing to police themselves. That last part is the hardest. Every community has criminals, every group has bad actors. But admitting that feels like betrayal. It feels like giving ammunition to people who already hate you. So silence becomes complicity, and complicity becomes corruption. Breaking that cycle requires courage. It requires leaders within communities to say no, to report suspicious activity, to choose country over comfort. Some did. The investigation succeeded partly because Somali informants provided tips, because community members recognized something was wrong and spoke up. They risked social ostracism, they risked retaliation, but they did it anyway. Those are the real heroes, not the criminals who wore victimhood like armor, but the ordinary people who refused to let their community be defined by its worst members. Their courage made the operation possible. The story of Judge Layla Mahad is a story of betrayal. Betrayal of an oath, betrayal of a community, betrayal of a country that gave her opportunity and trust. She wore the robe, she sat on the bench, she swore to uphold the law, and then she auctioned it to criminals. For money, for comfort, for greed. There's no tragedy in her fall, only justice. But there is tragedy in the wreckage she left behind. Families destroyed by fentanyl, communities fractured by suspicion, institutions weakened by corruption. That's the real cost. Not her prison sentence, but the damage that will take years to repair. If you believe this story matters, hit like so more people see it. As of March 2025, the investigation remains active. Federal task forces continue tracking financial networks. ICE continues processing immigration violations, and the State Department continues pressing for extraditions that will likely never happen. Judge Mahad's trial is scheduled for June. Legal analysts expect a conviction. The evidence is overwhelming. The crimes are undeniable. She will likely die in prison. Hassan Yusuf and his co-defendants face similar fates. Some will cooperate further. Some will fight. None will win. The fentanyl pipeline has been disrupted, but not destroyed. New routes are already being explored. New judges may already be compromised, because crime doesn't stop when you arrest criminals. It adapts, it evolves, it finds new weaknesses to exploit, and America has plenty of weaknesses. Overworked immigration courts, underfunded enforcement agencies, politically charged debates that paralyze action. Criminals thrive in that chaos. The only solution is vigilance. Constant, unrelenting, uncomfortable vigilance. That means asking hard questions, challenging comfortable narratives, and refusing to let identity politics shield criminals from accountability. It means trusting institutions while demanding they earn that trust. It means supporting refugees while prosecuting criminals. It means balancing compassion with security. None of that is easy, but nothing worth doing ever is. The Minneapolis operation showed that accountability is possible, that networks can be dismantled, that criminals can be caught, but it also showed how long they can operate before anyone notices, how much damage they can do, how deeply they can burrow into systems designed to help. 4 years, nearly 2,000 fraudulent approvals, hundreds of kilograms of fentanyl, millions of dollars laundered, all under the signature of a federal judge. That should terrify you, because if it happened in Minneapolis, it's happening elsewhere. The question isn't whether other networks exist, it's how many, and how long until we find them. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this story. This case will define immigration enforcement for the next decade. Prosecutors will point to it as evidence that the system needs reform, that judges need oversight, that asylum claims require verification. Advocates will argue that exploitation by criminals shouldn't justify punishing refugees, that cases like Mahad's are rare, that stricter enforcement will harm vulnerable people. Both sides have valid points. The system does need reform. Criminals do exploit it, but genuine refugees also need protection. Finding that balance is the challenge. The Minneapolis operation offers lessons. First, oversight matters. Judge Mahad operated freely because nobody was watching. Her approval rate should have triggered review. It didn't. Second, corruption thrives in complexity. Asylum law is complicated. Cases move quickly. That creates opportunities for fraud. Third, identity isn't immunity. Being a member of a marginalized community doesn't excuse criminal behavior. And fourth, silence is complicity. The network succeeded partly because people didn't speak up. Fear, loyalty, confusion. Whatever the reason, silence enabled crime. Those lessons apply beyond immigration. They apply to every system, every institution, every community. Corruption hides in complexity. Accountability prevents it. The men and women who raided those buildings in Minneapolis were doing what they swore to do, protecting America from threats foreign and domestic. Judge Mahad swore the same oath, and she broke it. That's the difference. Not politics, not identity, not ideology. Just right and wrong. If you understand that, comment truth below. The final word on this case won't be written for years. Trials will proceed, appeals will follow. Some convictions will stand, others may be overturned, but the damage is done, the trust is broken, and the system will never look the same. That's the legacy of Judge Layla Mahad, not the asylum seekers she helped, not the humanitarian reputation she built, but the criminal empire she enabled and the lives destroyed because she chose greed over duty. History will remember her as a traitor, not to an ideology, but to the oath itself. And that's exactly what she deserved. The broader fight continues, against networks that exploit compassion, against criminals who hide behind victimhood, against corruption that wears the mask of justice. It's a fight that requires courage, persistence, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. America's immigration system is broken, not because of refugees, but because criminals have learned to exploit it. Fixing it won't be easy. It will require compromise, cooperation, and a commitment to accountability over ideology. But it's possible. The men and women who brought down Judge Mahad proved that. They followed the evidence, they built the case, and they executed justice. They did their jobs. Now the question is whether America's institutions will do theirs, whether courts will hold judges accountable, whether legislators will fix broken systems, whether communities will choose courage over comfort. The answer will determine whether cases like this remain rare or become routine, whether America remains a nation of laws or descends into a nation of opportunities for those willing to exploit them. The choice is ours. If you believe justice is worth fighting for, hit like now. If you want to see more stories like this, comment more below. If you think accountability matters, share this video so others understand what's at stake. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next in this case and others like it. This is only the beginning. The networks are still out there, the criminals are still operating, and the fight for accountability continues. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and demand better from the institutions that serve you. Because when judges become criminals, who's left to deliver justice? The answer is us.